Executive of Jersey Business.
Good afternoon, I'm Rebecca Batten, Head of Service Development at Jersey Business.
Thank you. And our first question about the governance of Jersey Business. In the report and financial statement of 2012, the overarching aim of Jersey Business Limited is to support the creation and development of enterprise for the social and economic benefit of Jersey and mentioned 5 strategic objectives. Are they still your core functions and they're still your core objectives, or objectives change?
I think our vision is to be to allow the economy to thrive. So if it was word perfect, no. Is it in the spirit of what you have just read out to us? Very much so. In terms of those 6 overarching objectives, we now have today 3. They may be larger in the sense that they are, larger macroeconomic challenges, but there are 3. So,
why are you saying that it's not ideal as in the wording? What is missing there?
I guess I wanted to be accurate with my answer. Our remit is very much the same. In fact, actually, I did a bit of research because I haven't been in the organisation since that start point, and actually did a bit of reading. And actually, I used Copilot to review it. And actually, the summary, albeit a long one, the summary actually did conclude that, in essence, the principles and the objectives of the organisation remain pretty much the same as they were in the outset. Now, has it grown over time? Yes, and I'm sure we'll come on to that. But in principle, very much the same. For me, the words are slightly different, but the objective is pretty much the same.
But if you're looking at 2012, the principal activity of the company is provision, advice and support to on-island businesses and enterprise and to promote Jersey business in general. In 2024 annual reports and accounts, you stated that you are committed to accelerating the growth of productive economy in which businesses across all sectors contribute positively to the island long-term economic sustainability. Would you agree this represents a change in your principal activities from providing advice and support to businesses and promoting to focus in accelerating growth and productivity?
I think that's why I was careful to not say it's word accurate in terms of wordplay for wordplay. I think if we look to today's modern use of language around economic growth of an island versus perhaps back in 2011 when it was formed, I think it's changed in the style in which it's written, but I don't think it's necessarily fundamentally different than when we started. We still 80% of our effort remains around engaging with the business community. And so if you really sense check it beneath that to say the activity that is occurring beneath that statement, is it very much still about advising and supporting businesses and organisations on the island of Jersey? Then the answer is it is.
Okay, thank you. Now, take me through you said to allow economy to thrive. And I'm thinking about if I'm looking into the other ALOs or States of Jersey entities, Visit Jersey, Digital Jersey, Jersey Finance, all of them allow an economy to thrive. What's the difference? I mean, why we need 4 to allow economy to thrive and not 1, for example?
Yeah, I think over different periods of times, the government has set up ALOs for different reasons, I'm sure you've heard others account for that. My understanding is that Jersey business is focused across the whole economy. So if you think of Jersey business as a horizontal across the economy, so you think of the 12 SIC codes that exist across the economy and that would be reported in terms of economic GVA or GDP output. We cross all of those, but what you've referred to in other brother and sister ALOs is also what I might call some specialist vertical intervention that is perhaps designed for just that vertical and part of their remit is also marketing that sector very specifically as well. So I think whilst it's easy to say we all have an economic impact, which of course should be the case, I think they were designed to actually have a slightly more specialist, nuanced approach to a sector, whereas our design, as you'll see as we talk through some of the numbers, is that we cross right across the business environment in terms of SIC codes.
It's interesting because, like I said, you're across whole economy and you're really supporting across whole economy, but at the same time, you do have, like retail, it's sitting more than you. We don't have a special law or any other body that's taking care of looking after the retail. Or, for example, Jersey Hospitality is completely private. It's not part of the law makeup.
Yeah.
So, for example, if we're thinking about laws, and if you can take me through, for instance, when a company needs a help
Yes.
in digital space, how you determine what you would provide
Yeah.
and what Digital Jersey would deliver.
Yeah. So in that instance, a live example would be that some of those organisations may require business guidance. So perhaps thinking about how they incorporate or set up, if we were at the very beginning of that journey, our organisation has historically done that since 2011. That's part of an overall business, what I might call a business journey. So it's slightly agnostic as to what it is you are doing. It's a business journey, and that's why we are the horizontal, because actually they may be writing a business plan. They may be thinking about how they set up legal elements of the incorporation of the organisation. And the story would then obviously go on into how they develop and as they grow, and they might seek advice around that. I guess what you're looking for, the delineation. The delineation in my mind is that if you start now leaning into, I need specialist digital support in terms of what I might need in terms of either an incubator or working with other people in the technology space, that's what Digital Jersey would come into, what I would call that vertical slot, and we go across that horizontal.
Okay. So, for example, Digital Jersey has indicated in a recent hearing that they aided a number of digital businesses in applying to better business support package up to 2/3. How did this work in practice? Were both Jersey Business and Digital Jersey spending resource on this application if 2/3 businesses were involved with both of you?
I think my recall of that is that the 2/3 element is that 2/3 of Better Business grants have been spent on technology. So I think that's the 2/3 statement. I don't think 2/3 of technology companies have applied for Better Business grants.
2/3 of the spending. It is really good if you.
So yeah,
Okay.
I don't. 62% of the spend is on island, and in some of the early quarters, it was technology enabled. But that's where the applicant has chosen to spend money. That's not necessarily Digital Jersey enabled, for clarity. Where we did work together is actually there are, I think, 220 members of Digital Jersey, and when we came together to say about Better Business grants, what we actually came together to do was actually promote an event together at Digital Jersey, which we collaborated on, which was a good thing, to do two things. One is enable the digital environment themselves to understand there was a Better Business grant available. But what we also did is actually we also thought of what we call the supply activation side. So there are many suppliers in Jersey that actually could be principal suppliers of people that might want to spend money on technology. So there is a two-stage approach to that. So that's how the Better Business grant was kick-started, and we just thought that gave really good coverage, and that has then led to a number of organisations benefiting on what I might call the supply side, and also for beneficiaries themselves in terms of spending money on technology. And we have to work together in that space because. Sure. Most organisations tend to say if you ask them how they're going to develop productivity, then their answer often is technology. Certainly one of the three top answers for any organisation is actually deployment of some form of technology. It's not always the answer, but it is in some cases.
What joint work have you done with organizations that also provide education or skills training in related areas?
Yeah, so we've worked quite extensively because, as you're all very aware, the Better Business Grant is £5.3 million this year. It sits in three lanes, and one of those lanes is skills and apprentices. So we've worked very extensively with Skills Jersey, also with Highlands College, and with other skills facilitators outside of that remit as well, in the same way in which we just described the activation event. We've actually encouraged skills providers on island to be part of promotion of the Better Business Grants, because it enables people to have the investment. And actually, many of you, I'm sure, may be readers of the JP. We did a supplement just recently, and our aim was actually to re-promote and actually really try and lead in that supplement to enable skills providers to promote their services to enable more uptake of the skills grant.
And how do you work with Chamber of Commerce? Do you have any overlap with the Chamber of Commerce?
Yeah, I think.
Or do you work together with
We do, yes. I was 4 years, I was a retail and supply chain committee member for 4 years before this job. I know that organisation incredibly well, and the team, we do work well together. I think we form different functions. I like to think of there's a government side, there's a market side, there's people that lobby and promote members, and then there are what I might call ALOs, who are trusted partners for both delivery and facilitation. We sit in the ALO category, but actually we work very extensively with Murray and Lee and many of the committee members. In fact, I think it was last week, if I get my weeks correct, we were actually part of a AI forum workshop where actually, and again, this is where we come from a business angle, so we're not AI advisors, but in 2023 we deployed Copilot. So we've been using it as a team for a long while, and we joined that organisation, Chamber of Commerce, for a meeting breakfast, and actually we did some videos on how various members of our team actually deploy Copilot in their day-to-day living. So actually really just to take Copilot from what can be quite a big topic to a place where this is actually how we use it. So just an example of how we do work with Chamber, and we meet on a regular basis to understand where they are, some of their members' needs, which is critically important. Obviously, we get that feedback from over 3,000 interactions that we have a year anyway, but at the same time, it's really good to make sure we've got a 360-degree view.
Yeah. So I enjoyed that little talk. Actually, AI, I was there. So
Great.
yeah, I was there, and I enjoyed what your team had to put together on that.
Thank you.
Looking at the other side, though, how do you align with the government priorities more so than the businessmen out there?
Yeah. So you will have probably had a look at our business plans. So our business plans are, fairly comprehensive in their design. And often we look at, before we build any of these, we look at what I would call external strategic inputs and then what I would call internal strategic inputs. So as part of the external strategic inputs, and you're going to have to forgive me because I've got to look down a bit because there is actually quite a lot of different papers that we would take into account when we're building the strategy. So the Minister's Economic Plan is obviously part of that. The Government Common Strategic Policy, elements of that, economic well-being is in there. Business environment, jobs and productivity growth, affordable living. We obviously work with the economy team, both the future economy team and the local economy team. You can take that to sector leads in the economy team. When we build our network of thinking, we put all of those inputs in. We work with other ALOs when we're building that. We also work with the Chamber of Commerce, Jersey Hospitality Association, the IOD, Jersey Construction Council. We also look at inputs from the likes of Stats Jersey, because they're really interesting around GVA challenges and GDP challenges. And then we obviously look at the island income outcome indicators in terms of economic well-being. So that's just a bit of a flavour. of where we use those. Now, they all may sound quite strategic, but of course we bring that to life through engagement as well.
Yeah, how often do you actually meet then with the government? When it
Oh,
comes
very
to these sort of
regularly.
things?
So if you look from a governance point of view, of course, our governance has annual reporting, schedules around it, quarterly meetings around it, which of course we comply to in terms of our operating agreement. But if I was to say how much work we do, if you think about where we're engaged with the economy and the economy team partners, I would say we have a really strong collaborative understanding and relationship, both through both delivery and understanding. And we're connected, I suppose, through the local economy in terms of our core grant. We're connected to the broader BBSP, which I'm sure you've heard a lot of today. Our part of that is the Better Business Grant, which is the 5.3 million. So that connects us to Tom Holvey and the Future Economy team. We also support the Agricultural Loan Scheme, so that connects us to the local economy again, but John Vautier within the agricultural sector. So, we're pretty, I'll stop there, but I guess the point is we're fairly comprehensively connected.
Actually, I had a link question in between what was before and now with the work at the government. So from all the cross collaboration you had with ALOs, state-owned entities and the government, where do you see, I understand the differences in how you operate, but where do you see overlapping activities and possibility of possibly amalgamating any part of operations, either yours to other entities or from other entities to yours, to make efficiency and not overlap?
Yeah, I think since I've been in post, there's always been open dialogue about is there opportunities to think about efficiencies and cost savings, so and entirely open to that discussion, and we've visited that discussion a number of times as an organisation and said, are there ways in which we could think about working more closely together? I think that occurs now, and I think some of what could look like externally overlap, if you work very cautiously together, it can be incredibly complementary. So you may say the agricultural piece isn't there an overlap from that, but as our work as a delivery partner, we sort of try really hard to bolt up what we do onto the end of what others do, and that it doesn't pair perfectly every single time, but I think we're very conscious of it, and we do work both with the government and ALOs in that particular way. If you think more broadly, I've often wondered whether there is an opportunity to think about any buying consolidation that could occur. If you think of larger scale procurement and you think of all of us as one house, possibly there's opportunities there. More than anything, I think, in my mind, it's about, what do we think about the investments and where we place investments, and what are the considerations about where those investments are best deployed. And of course, that's more about, government partners being able to understand that. And of course, we all do our very best to represent good, solid investment. But of course, I guess in some ways, you need to think about, is it right and is it pertinent? Is it short-term, long-term? So there's also a mix there as well to consider in that question, I think.
Okay. You did mention briefly there was the island-wide outcomes. Yeah. So you mentioned about this golden thread in one of the submissions I remember reading about. Yeah. And the government has got indicators out there on the statistics dashboard, all looking green and lovely, which is nice to see. But how do you contribute to that and understand how your data then shows how that is becoming green, so it's more understanding with what goes into that green output at the end of the day when it comes specifically to employment?
I think when we think about what we do over the course of the year, we will reach over 4,000 of the 8,500 businesses. We'll interact this year by the end of the year with about 3,000 in real terms. And the reason I answer it in that way is because we get real-term insights, because we meet businesses on an incredibly regular basis. And whilst I'm a huge fan of data and statistics, and we have considerable amount that you will have read in our submission in terms of the way in which we build out our business to use that data and insight. So I think in some ways we can support a feedback loop to the economy team, to industry, and actually play back, well, okay, it looks like a green light on a dashboard, but let's bring that to life in terms of real lived experience.
Yes, it's more of the actual impact rather than coincidental.
Yes.
Yeah, okay. I've just got one other final one really, is how does your partnership agreement and your business plan align with each other? And does the government monitor and assess your performance against those?
Yeah, so we have a new grant agreement. It started on the 31st of March 2025, ends on 31st of December 2027. It's overarching, and then off the back of that, there are schedules that are attached to it in terms of performance schedules. And so we operate with those various elements I've described earlier. So if you think of it as an overarching principled agreement over the term I've just mentioned, beneath it are subset 1-year agreements that operate on a yearly cycle. So as we sit here now, we have a submission to the plan by the end of 31st of October that says that's the plan for 2026 in all of those continued areas. And then we will work with the government team and the minister to shape that. And of course, it doesn't go in cold and blind. We've already done quite a lot of work on the other side of the 31st of October to shape it. So overarching agreement with 1 yearly schedules off the back of that. Was that all your question? Did I answer?
That's from myself, yes.
Yeah.
But,
Okay.
So, thank you. I'm interested in all of it, but my questions are to do with value for money and performance measurement. So you brought up a very interesting point that you've changed your goal setting slightly, more than somewhat, since March of this year up until the end of 27. How does that interact with your traditional KPI reporting for 25, 24 and then 25?
Yeah, so I joined the organisation in 2023. There were 6. We reduced them to 3. Those 3 principal objectives remain the same for 26. They are productivity, people, knowledge, and data sharing. Those are the 3, and you would have seen those. So they remain very much the same. But how we actually deliver on those, of course, can change, and I think it should. So within that time, we've been delivering. We support inquiries as a KPI, so we will, of last year, if I remember correctly, the number is about 600 in 2026 to 700 inquiries in 2024 as a KPI. We would have looked at about 1,500 inquiries. So I would say that we've got top line those 3. Then we work on what do we do behind those to deliver, which can be programs, it can be productivity promotion. People can be training and support, and knowledge and data is slightly easier to recognise. And then off the back of that boils all the way down to what actual numbers in terms of inputs are going to be off the back of that. So if we take business improvement programme, there's sort of just over 2 million worth of savings from process improvement through organisations over time. So I guess we sort of start with what is the outcome we're trying to deliver, which is really support productivity on the island, and that's not particularly just unique to Jersey people, which is the human capital part. From an economic point of view, we all know how hard that can be for the island. And then the last one actually is also about knowledge diffusion. That actually can be a challenge in most economies to think about how you do that. So our framework actually over the period I've just described is pretty much the same, although we might find ways in which we look at our data and say, is that really performing against our objective? Is the engagement as we would have liked? And then from our point of view as a senior leadership team, we might adjust that.
Great. So a lot of what you described was activities.
Yes.
And you mentioned one outcome, and the outcome was to do with £2 million worth of productivity savings accounted for. As a slight diversion before I drill more into that, you've also mentioned that you're a large horizontal element of the Jersey framework where you support a lot of different industries, and you've mentioned in particular collaborations with Digital Jersey. Who gets the credit for the interactions and the activities when you have a joint event? Whose KPIs is that added to? Is it yours, theirs? Do you split them 50-50? How's it work?
It's a really good question. Firstly, Jersey business has never been credit hunters. I have to say that at the beginning of the, and I don't think any of us are. But I guess there could be. I can't account for the submissions of both parties, can I? So it's a difficult. So I don't think. We would not say we did this. This was our number, and no one else was involved. I would not knowingly put that together. Is there any oversight anywhere in which we have declared that? I'd like to think not, but it certainly would not be our intent to do that.
The purpose of the question is not to achieve a firm answer; it was to illustrate a point.
Yes. Yeah. I understand.
When we're looking at value for money, however, of course, you have a very broad set of activities. How do you actually measure the outcomes to the island? Okay, there may be co-attribution to activities that DJ or anyone else may have added into it, but how do you actually measure the improvements? You've mentioned one, which is £2 million worth of productivity savings, which is, I don't know what period that's over, but the point is that is the sort of data that we like. Because we can actually measure it, and then we can judge people against those performances. What other hard numbers can you deliver or offer?
I think input, engagement, and outcomes are all measures.
Activities.
But I think if you look at investment, you have to put an input to get the outcome. So I think whilst I appreciate each of them will have a different attributable value to each of them, I think we track our activities and our engagement very comprehensively. This year, for example, 925 new businesses will have engaged with Jersey Business that have never engaged with us before. So that begins to talk to engagement. The reach number has increased beyond 4,000, as I stated earlier. And actually, within our data set, if you then go and look at what I might call lagging data points, which comes to really what you're asking me, if you look at lagging data points, and if you look at the October 5th or October 3rd report from Jersey Statistics of GDP or GVA data, and you had a look at some of the sectors in which we were engaged, a couple of things out there which are direct, I'm careful to say that attribute, when you see an upside of a data point, it's good to say it was all us, and so I'd be careful with attribution here because it can be quite difficult. But nevertheless, you'll see that there was a 42% growth in export. We've been on the SOG export board now for some time, helping in developing export. So there's a 42% growth in export goods in 2024. If you also look at the GVA input in terms of sectorial GVA input that is in that same report, and you relate to some of the sectors that we deal with, you'll also find there's significant GVA shift in some of those sectors. But I would caution that it's sometimes difficult. The same with BBG when we were speaking to the chief economist about you'll give one business some support, an activity, or in fact you'll give another business the same, or in fact you'll give them the same amount of money, and it's very difficult to say that exactly all of that input was actually as a direct correlation of Jersey Business. So those are some of the numbers that we would use. I'd love those to be more up to date. I think in final, and you've got a lot of data, but I appreciate we've only got so much time in which to share. The other point I would make is we collect NPS data across our organisation to see the quality of service. It's at 75, And if anyone knows NPS data, it goes up to 100 this way, it goes down to minus 100 the other way. 75 is, you know, a really global standard, and it's been consistently around that 70 mark for many, many years. So that's also perhaps a sign, one would hope, that the organisation is doing a job that is of value to the people that engage with us on a consistent basis. I believe that to be true.
Thank you. So I appreciate the difficulty that you're grappling with, and it's anticipated in terms of demonstrating value for money in an area like this.
Yeah.
Turning it on its head, what would happen if Jersey Business shut its doors tomorrow? What would the impact be? Who would fill in the gaps? What gaps would be filled in? And what would be the overall impact?
Yeah. I think sometimes you have to think of, and this is something some of you may have already heard me say in the past, but Jersey's ecosystem is a really wonderful thing, but it's also quite fragile. I think you probably know that much better than I do. But the reality is there's 8,500 business undertakings in Jersey. 5,000 of them are one-person FTEs. 89% of them are less than 9 FTEs. So actually having somewhere there is an ability in which to come in, ask questions and think about knowledge diffusion and think about 350 years of experiences in Jersey business, in business experience. We all come from a business background, which is, I think, part of why we work in the way we do. So to answer your question, if it wasn't here, where would that market go to get those solutions? I think that would be a tough thing to think about. And I would also say that whilst we're here to grow the economy, I think we've also, over the period of the existence of Jersey Business, helped organisations through very difficult times, helped organisations with resilience. And so sometimes it's about actually, how have you enabled growth in the market? But actually, if you're in a declining market and you arrest decline, then actually that's also a benefit. That's a really difficult thing to talk to. Mm-hmm. And I'll be honest, the government, I think, makes a really solid bet in deploying capital to invest in supporting the businesses. If you do the math of 1.8 million divided by 8,500 businesses, or you divide it by the number of employees in Jersey today, it isn't a particularly big number. But I think it is a number that actually is worthy of its investment to support the economy. And I also think the economy and the businesses really value it in the way that I've just described. Now, we're not there for all the time for everyone, because that would be wrong, but we are there and we do support businesses in both good times and perhaps in challenging times, and I think that's really important. What's also important is the consistency of investment and actually showing that actually the economy is valued in the way that perhaps it is shown for Jersey Business to be open to the support that we give and are funded to do.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yep, sure. So in your annual report and account 2024, you take 3 risks. You list 3 risks, I should say. Can you advise the PAC what you feel is the most significant risk facing Jersey Business from that list?
My memory as to what the list was, David. 2024. Oh, in fact, it's in that business plan, isn't it? I'll start my answer because I think, the one that is always top, I think, is making sure that we have funding. And the way I view that is, we've been established since 2011 and we're very pleased to be able to have that funding. But making sure we have the funding can be a risk. But actually, my personal view on how you mitigate the risk is that you can display consistent approach and you can display consistent value. So one of the risks that's always pretty much on our risk register is that we're an organisation that works in a 12-month cycle and a funding cycle, which is a 12-month cycle. And so that in itself can be a risk. But it's also, if you flip it the other way to the counter positive, I've been in commercial organisations that I would never know how much income I would actually have bankable for the entire 12 months of my for my existence. So from that point of view, there is some risk. That would be one. You asked for,
Yes,
I think you asked for 3.
Two more. Carry on, two others.
It's just the risk.
Are there any risks of disalignment between your partnership agreement and your business plan?
I think there can always be a risk of engagement or non-delivery on our part. We keep a very close handle on that. So obviously within the organisation, I've already mentioned, we collect an awful lot of insight and data in our engagement and our performance. There can be moments in which we'll get to the end of a quarter and think about how we're performing. I have to say, in the time I've been with the organisation against our delivery plan, we've consistently delivered, and we have always set ourselves ambitious growth targets. So in 2024, we grew our engagement by 29% and our funding went down by about 5%. In 2025, if you come forward, our engagement's gone up 50%. And so, we've really tried to think about how do we deliver value and how we actually lower costs. Okay, is that okay? Yeah. You gave me time, thank you very much. I think there's two other that we speak of, David. One can be strategic change, and obviously, as we sit here today, there's possibly change in strategy from a government point of view, and so we would be very mindful of that strategy and that future. And I think that said, that it's probably more acute now, but nevertheless, I think we're also very mindful that there could be changes in the way in which the government funding envelope would need to change to adapt. We're not the only sole beneficiary of that. We fully respect that. And we know that sometimes investment thesis or capital needs to be deployed in different ways. So I think that's both a strategic and financial risk. That's two. Okay. And I think the third one is that as an organisation, we have, over the 3 years, as I have already mentioned, we have worked very hard to make sure that our proposition is one that works. And we've also worked very hard to make sure that from a resource allocation point of view, we focus where it matters. Mm-hmm. And the reason I point that out as perhaps a risk is that, from a funding envelope point of view, mm-hmm. and from a demand point of view, at some point, our demand, in the way I've just illustrated, almost outweighs our ability to allocate resources to support that. Mm-hmm. That's perhaps a positive, but it also is, you've got to be cautious that actually you don't then sort of have such a broad remit that you can't meet it and you can't deliver it. And we have to keep those quality standards up to make sure that we can deliver. And just so those would be the
I was going to say, just to be topical here, so yes. Did you work with Blue Island?
No, most of our work is confidential, but okay. For the purposes of the question, okay. Obviously we know of, but no, we did not. So, just a question there.
Yeah, we have a kind of extra. We'll take another 5 minutes if it's okay. Yeah.
So. So I'm just reading very quickly because you've answered quite a few bits and pieces. Yeah, so can you advise PAC if you've ever received any top-up grants, and if so, what were they, and if not, could you advise if that option remains open to you?
Yes, if we look to this moment in time, as we sit in 2025, our core funding envelope is 1457, I think, if I recall it accurately. And that was a reduction on the prior year of 1.7 million. But actually, we stepped back in our core funding to enable top-up grants to look towards the delivery of the Better Business Grant, which you are very aware of. So there is a top-up grant in there for both the development of the digital platform, the marketing of it, and the delivery of it, which if you look at any other standard monetary deployment of funds, that's just less than 5%. If you look at anywhere across most of certain Western economy, it will range anywhere between 5 and 10%. So I think that is good value for money, but that's a top-up grant. There is also an agri-loan top-up grant where we are working with the agricultural sector. So that's part of our top-up. There was also last year for social enterprise work that we did a small grant. Mm-hmm. And did I miss one?
I think that's a good series of examples there. I think I'm done. Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah.
On the grants bit, I just would like to understand how many businesses you've seen coming forward to get support.
Oh, on the grant?
Yes.
Yeah, I'm glad you asked. It's well, firstly, I'd like to recognise that sometimes deploying 20 million or 5.3 in this case of the Better Business Grant, I think it's a tremendous thing. It doesn't happen very often, and I think from a business point of view, it's great. And I as a
What
matter
are
of
the
record,
sectors that came?
the sectors that have come, we have engaged with around about right now about 290 different businesses. The range of sectors is very comprehensive. So there isn't. I wouldn't point to a sector that is particularly under-indexed. And actually, you will have seen through the quarterly reporting that in terms of the value add, it was a one-to-one matched. And right now, I think it stood at 2.9 for every pound. There's a Q3 report which actually extends on that. You may have the privilege of seeing that, but right now it's higher than that. So sectorially, to answer your question, a very broad,
main areas of
a
improvement.
very broad spread, actually, of sectorial spread, which actually is what we wanted.
The main area for improvement they're looking at.
Well, technology, in terms of technology development, is certainly been part of it. There's also been capital equipment within some of those grants, within the hospitality sector, for example, because of course I'm sure you know that there is a Vista Economy Development Grant ring fenced, which is $1 million, which will go into the sector, which I think right now will probably spin out £3 million worth of investment into the sector. And a lot of that, coming back to the basis of your question, a lot of that is actually either enabling smarter technology to be quicker, smarter and better in terms of CX, or the deployment of some capital equipment that will enable the organisation to be more effective.
And if anyone does listen online, these are open until when on all sectors?
Yeah, the grants for this year will close on the 1st of December. Anyone that has opened the portal will have had an email to notify them of that, and then it will reopen for 2026 in January. And I think the other part of the Better Business Grant that is worthy of note is 62% of that money is being spent on Ireland. So secondary impact, but I think
be my other question.
Nevertheless, it's important. Yeah.
That was as of end of Q2 2024.
Okay, perfect. What are the impacts of Jersey business being, if would be to be a commercial enterprise?
Yeah, I think that's one that we revisit quite a lot. So it's not a question we haven't considered. I think there's a number of parts to the fact, I was asked a question at the beginning about 2011, the founding principles. If you look at the founding principles of 2011, it spoke to us to be independent and confidential. They still stand today. And so there are some moments in which you think about how could you commercialise the organisation without putting the integrity of that into question. I don't think it's an easy yes, no binary answer, but it is something that we as a board have often visited because, of course, we're very aware that there are always challenges on fund and envelope, but we're also acutely aware that some of our absolute value as an organisation is the very fact that we are independent, we are confidential, and if you suddenly brought some commercial entity or sponsor into that may have a initial uptick of monetary benefit, but you could ride that further down the line and say that it actually presents a risk. And so on balance, I think more often than not, when we've discussed it both with our government colleagues and also as a board, we kind of go around that circle. That's not to say we haven't played with some elements, because all of our programs were anyone that came on a program did make payments. And we've also done some work where actually some of the suppliers have provided solutions and programs for free. So we have managed to get better value in that way. That's less obvious, but that's a way in which we have done some of that. But even that comes with an element of risk that we are very mindful of.
On a bit of a similar note, there has been a recent JP opinion article questioning the private or public nature of the arm's length organizations in Jersey. In your opinion, which is Jersey business, private or public?
We're a limited company. So, if you took it by its absolute definition, we're a limited company. We have a board, and that board operates as an independent business and company. we are minded that the funding envelope comes from the economy team, of which we're grateful. And so I think that's where sometimes the blur can occur or be perceived.
So in matter of perception, do you think would influence expectations or governance?
Yeah, I've worked in many organisations all over the world, and the governance and the rigour that goes around an organisation that enjoys 1.8 million pounds worth of funding is comprehensive. And so from that point of view, I think there is an element that maybe looks slightly more public entity in that workflow, but I understand that there is a integration that's required with government procedures and public finance manual. So whilst, that looks in part, it can look from a private limited business, can look comprehensive, but if you look at it from the other way, with respect to everyone in the room, if you look at it the other way, then actually I think it's a necessary part of the way in which the organisation works. I think if you strip it out from its entity and its legal status and think about behaviourally, which I think is probably far more valuable, we're a very trusted partner between both government, the economy and businesses, and perhaps some of those sectorial representations that were mentioned earlier. So we sort of play a trusted partner in that. And so I think why I've just said that is I think that's what makes us both valuable and independent. And I think that's really valuable.
We're gonna also send probably some more questions, but what I just want to touch on the remuneration part, that was a discretionary bonus on 3,000 paid in 2023. Why have no further bonuses been paid, or what performance criteria triggers discretionary bonus in that?
In that particular instance, that was just as the I'm finding my words without declaring too much. Just as I left, that was a recognition and thank you for. There were two members of the C-suite in the organisation up until the point in which I started, of which there is now one. So Bex is part of the senior leadership team, but I'm the chief exec and only executive officer. There were previously two. So the thing that you're pointing out there was actually a thank you and discretionary reward for the contribution of that individual. Some of you may know who I'm referring to. It wasn't the chief exec, and actually that was a board decision, which of course it would always be in terms of those bonuses to deploy. I wasn't part of the board at that point, but I'm just trying to give you the context around the question.
And do you know if the government plays any role in decisions of this remuneration in the board?
In that particular instance, I think the answer is it's hard. I don't know in that particular instance. I'm sorry.
Okay. Any? Thank you very much for your answers. And the public hearing is closed. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Okay.
Thank you.
All right. Thanks for the question.
Thank you.